Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and today we're looking at Tabletop Simulator. So, I've played a lot of more bespoke tabletop games, and a lot of them are from Asmodee Digital, and they all kind of feel like they are just not really polished enough or not unique enough that you couldn't just use a theoretical tabletop simulator, lowercase tabletop simulator, to do it better. You would pay less, you would have more of a connected interface to play online with people. And so I've often said that, but I haven't actually gotten around to looking at Tabletop Simulator, which would be your number one pick of the options. I can see that it seems like, to begin with, it's a fairly simple interface. There's a little message that pops up here when you first log in. As far as mods, I know there is a lot of DLC for specific games, and there is just a question there, certainly, as far as whether or not the, let's see, so there's a whole chat integrated element there. It's nice you can turn the font up. But yeah, it's questionable without buying DLC. Can you play most games that would be traditional board games and card games, dice games? Is it really feasible? Or, like other simulators I've seen, is it a case where really you're just dragging a chess piece from point A to point B, but there is no programming logic to it by default, and it's simply just the players enforcing the rules as far as who wins and who doesn't? Now, according to GeForce Experience, all the visual settings here are set correctly, and frankly, for this game, I would question if you couldn't have everything just at a very high version, high level of quality. And on a real level here, this is also very much a kind of game that could asset flip quite a bit, since it is more of a simulator than even a game in the name. It doesn't seem like it has any controller support, but it does seem like it would work on the Steam Deck, and that is the main reason why I'm playing this right now, is that I want to see and test out how it runs on my Steam Deck, but I wanted to make some video footage. It supports VR. And then apparently there's a whole block list of Steam ID people. Now I know there's some integration to Discord, but I don't think you inherently have to do everything through Discord or any other interface. We can see that there's some updates here as far as Twitter icon here instead of the X icon, which this is probably broken and doesn't work. And then like Discord and Facebook, and yeah, some pics there. And what is this all about? Just credits. So we have a decent number of people, not a huge amount. And apparently there was some Kickstarter supporters, which this is really nice as far as a credits interface, in that you can actually, if you were a Kickstarter supporter, fairly quickly get to your name instead of credits always scrolling downward. Which, yeah, now that I think about it, it is kind of crazy that games have credits just like movies that are non-interactive, when it would make a lot more sense for you to be able to search the credits alphabetically, just type in a name and have it pop up, be able to scroll up and down the credits yourself. This game looks like it has been fairly updated, if it's up to 13.2, and this is just the exit thing. So let's see. Now, the biggest problem with me personally and Tabletop Simulator is going to be the fact that I have no friends, and so I cannot recommend this game to anybody like that. And of course I'm just joking about that, but yeah, I really don't have a schedule and a group of people that I could ever actually create a game. So let's try single player. And let's start with just a classic test here of poker. And so it's got my name upside down. It's got a whole bunch of things that looks like you can just annotate things with. Interesting. I'm not sure you really need that now in this game. I could see other games where that might make sense, and this may just be a case where you maybe could just goof around with your friends. But yeah, this looks much more like a paint program than it does a video game. So let's just start with the basic question here. If we're playing poker, one would assume we are going to take a card and flip it. Alright, so I'm just dragging cards seemingly anywhere. So there's really no enforcement here of being required to do anything. Yeah. You can make notes. You have some kind of profile. And we did classic there. Objects are just items and components you can add. You can zoom in and out. Music. Not gonna play anything. You would have to straight up set up your own audio. So in a lot of ways, this feels like this is just something that would be nice during like the COVID pandemic. But that's kind of it. Like, this would make a lot of sense. During a pandemic, but it doesn't seem like there are any rules enforced here. It does seem like you have to have friends that would enforce a rule, otherwise you're just playing for yourself. Like, I can't even figure out how to flip a card. Yeah. Like, so somehow drawing. But if do you really have to? Like, seriously, what is the interface here? Little mouse button zooms in nicely, but holding just moves a card. Double clicking does nothing. Triple clicking, quadruple clicking does nothing. And right clicking, both mouse buttons, does nothing. So yeah, kind of crazy that the way to draw a card is to right click things. So my only thought here is if I'm playing a single player game, let's see if Dominoes makes some more sense here. Dominoes as a single player game is believable more than poker is. Okay. So I'm gonna draw a pile of cards that don't seem to orient the dominoes in any way. So by default you are just going to be in silence playing this game. There's no background music by like, let's see, unless there is a default playlist you can add to it. Nope. You just have to bring in your own music, and that seems kind of lackluster. I can't really say Tabletop Simulator with its DLC is cheap by any means either. Again, it's to draw. You have to right click. There might be a thing here. So let's say you put that down, and then you put that down. How would you rotate it? You have to rotate it yourself. We're gonna do that. And then there seems to be no snapping at all. And then you have a flip the table option. While funny, apparently also have a blindfold option. Picture in picture option. These aren't terrible ideas, they're just ideas that don't lead to an actual game. They lead towards a bunch of what you'd assume is a bunch of people who had already established a relationship of, I guess you can just roll dice. That's good enough. But then if the dice falls off the table, it doesn't seem like it comes back. Kinda can flip a coin. But yeah, I would definitely say you have to be already well versed in the rules of a game like this. I don't even know what this is. I would assume there's some kind of trick here where you have to, well, maybe you stack things on top of other things, or I don't know. It does have physics in it. We just have cards. But yeah, you would just have to kind of heavily rely on the keys, the hot keys, and you'd have to just become an expert in using all of this. Okay. So let's just go down the list here as far as what this is going to be. Yeah, you can't do a jigsaw puzzle. Now, weirdly, this does highlight an issue with jigsaw puzzles on Steam, in that there are thousands, maybe even 1 million games on Steam that are low effort jigsaw puzzles. Usually, more often than not, it is images that are either easily licensed or just stolen off the internet with no concern with copyright, or at least it looks that way to my knee-jerk perception. And almost none of them allow you to load in your own images because they want to sell you yet another jigsaw puzzle next week. A lot of the jigsaw puzzles on Steam also just have like anime girls on them. So for this feature alone, I would say Tabletop Simulator is doing a little bit better. But I can't even play it without... Let's see. How do we... Can we open this box and get the pieces out of here? Or is it just a case because I didn't load an image in? Yeah. You think double clicking, middle clicking, right clicking, something could do something. Yeah, very obviously here there should be some basic tutorials, there should be some basic default game to start with. Otherwise you really are just needing to flip the table to get any action or entertainment at all. Let's just flip that table too off into space, off into a grass background, generic grass background. But yeah, the thing I think we'd run into though, even with that, as far as puzzles go, is that I don't think anything is going to snap together. Here's another thing, like, okay, we've got a little bit of snap here, so at least that's accurate as far as a snap. This is a weird way for this board to be laid out. So yeah, I wouldn't behoove you if you didn't recognize what this game was. I forget the name of it, but yeah, usually it's squares and it doesn't have this many players. It usually only has 4 paths and 4 players, and to play you have to roll a dice, and then you can only move what you rolled. But notice here, nothing's enforcing that. So you can, instead of going all the way around, which is what you're supposed to do based on the number of pips on the die you roll, or you may roll 2 dice, I'm not sure. You then go to here. Not that much of a snap. Here, you can just goof around. And you can certainly cheat. And so effectively there I just won, and yet the game's not recognizing that due to cheating. I don't think you ever put a dice marble here. Maybe this is some weird variant I'm unaware of. You've got classics like chess. Yep. What you would want here though is to encourage new players to know how to play the game, instead of just having a fairly well moddable interface that you can pick up objects and drop objects, particularly when you're getting to chess. There's my icon there. There's a lot that can be taught as far as chess, and this is just doing none of that. Notice here I am able to do anything I want, including seemingly just dropping items onto other items and picking up the other player's pieces. Yeah, Nintendo has like Club 51 sports games, and I definitely would recommend that way more for the Nintendo Switch than I would this, because this is almost nothing. I noticed custom here seems where you would get into the idea of perhaps creating your own game, but I imagine that would be fairly hard to do, and even if you did do it, it's still not like you're programming anything, unless I'm just doing the wrong thing here. Then tools is very much just a bunch of items you might do if you were dungeon mastering. And I can't help but suspect that this browser might actually be a real browser. Yeah. It seems like that really is the case, is that it is just a web browser. Either that or it's just being silly and it cycles through a bunch of dumb items. I don't know how many games you really need even a browser for. But yeah, overall, color me disappointed. This does not feel like what I thought Tabletop Simulator was going to be. The cards work here somewhat, but not particularly great. There's no snapping to a specific position. You can drag cards wherever you want. You can cheat all over the place. And I would say particularly when you start to get to, this isn't even really a board game or a tabletop game as much as this seems to just be a way to play around with things, unless this is some game called Sandbox I've never heard of. Yeah, generally I do imagine there is a better version of every single one of these classic games just because they put energy to program them, and I thought that these games would have been programmed better than that, or it would have a better interface for this, so I'm really disappointed on this. Now, if you're not sure what game you're going to play, if you're going to have multiple games that you plan on playing throughout a session, connecting together and doing all of that, I have no idea what Cardbots is. See, again, the draw button is driving me kind of crazy. And there seems to be some control of what's happening here as far as what cards you have and where you can put them. I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, I guess if you wanted one session, if you wanted a decent amount of control, if you were making a game night, then this has that slight advantage. This is more of an advantage, I would say, slightly, to playing this in the real world. And certainly this Tabletop Simulator is obviously for people who can't meet together in the real world. The little animations here are kind of nice. And I would say digitally, you might have more freedom to slowly build out a tile set digitally and just have one obsessive game master focus on decorating a game like this a lot more on his own time instead of all that setup either being done in the real world or being done while all the other people are here are ready to play. But even this is really more of an example of what you would do, and it's really not quite enough space for as large as all of these are. Yeah. So yeah, when you start to get into role-playing games, when it starts to get a little crazy with the number of pieces, that makes sense. But when you're just playing solitaire, there are better solitaires. And notably, a game like solitaire also is just going to be a better experience overall if you play it on a mobile game platform. And this is where you're going to start to really potentially spend a lot of money, is once you are buying DLC for specific board games, which I would say scroll here is not particularly great. I am not a tabletop fan, certainly, but I also don't recognize any of these. I feel like there should be some I recognize. Yeah. I do not recognize a single one of these games. Which there should be at least a couple names I recognize. So there is a real decent chance, and I can only admit to ignorance here, as far as, but my guess is that there's a decent chance that these are B, C tier games, or games that have just specific pieces that absolutely you would need to buy DLC for it to work. Yeah. I'm not seeing anything here like Cards Against Humanity, which or Ticket to Ride, or Clue, or Monopoly. So anything from like Asmodee, anything from Hasbro, these just don't seem to exist. I guess maybe I recognize Super Fight. Might be the only one I do recognize. So, yeah, there's an issue certainly there. And this would be the 3 games that I tried to auto start. Let's see. Then there are workshops, things that would be separate install items, and I specifically downloaded The Binding of Isaac 4 Souls here. Last Cards Encore. And let's see what happens here. Is this just a whole bunch of textures that is having to download, it looks like. This would be where the advantage of a simulator might come in, is that you would have a actual customization factor there that would be very hard to do for tabletop only games that don't have a digital version. Binding of Isaac 4 Souls is kind of an example of that, in that it is a rarer game. You're only going to get it from one place, and you're only going to have a small number of people who know what it is or even play it. Noticeably, as far as card games, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel would be kind of an example of a collectible card game that would never really work in this setup, because you would just have to have constant updates, constant new content. Inherently, Tabletop Simulator does not have a path towards microtransactions or games as services, so all it could try and sell you is DLC, and I imagine the DLC it's selling is mostly just paying for the license of images. So, yeah. Deal. Draw. Yeah, nothing just like works. Nothing works at all. As far as the way I would expect it to work. Okay. And we'll see if we can just zoom in and see that the quality of the image on this card, as far as the card scans, does look pretty good for a workshop game. The bag of counters, though, really doesn't have anything to show. The back art of the cards looks good, but a lot of this otherwise is just kind of generic elements. It definitely has a feeling as far as a feeling that you would potentially want to play this if somebody else had done the setup, way more than you would want to play it yourself with the setup. There's just a whole bunch of counters and a whole bunch of rules here. You have to zoom in quite a bit here to read that text on the back of the card. Several different cards. Of course, if you're not a fan of yeah, if you're not a fan of Binding of Isaac, you're not going to be a fan of this card game spin-off. Yeah. The Lost Souls card game is sort of collectible in the sense that you could get it now, but also kind of difficult. Also, getting to the workshop and just browsing, yeah, will just bring up the Steam overlay for you to browse. And so my recorder's not recording any of that. Let's see. There are 64,482,000 mods under Tabletop Simulator. So that's something to say, I guess. You have a rewind time, go forward in time option. I appreciate that. So you can undo things. Yeah. In this case, flipping the table seems to just drop the table into total darkness. Alright, well, I think that's gonna be all I can really say about it. As a simulator, there's a lot of options, but I'm not a simulator critic, I'm a video game critic, and so my expertise here is going to be somewhat limited as far as what is actually needed versus what isn't. Noticeably, there's no pen and paper games in this list. where it does seem like you probably could have crosswords and Sudoku and things like that if you crafted it, but yeah. Seems like you do have a decent number of items, but perhaps not a huge number of items. As far as heroes, you have 5 hero classes, and that would just be that as far as adding components to set up your table. But that tells me there is not a female knight version and anything special like that. Most of this does seem to me like this is just assets that have been, for the most part, flipped. Cards here, they're missing any of the Hanafuda flower cards from Japan, or tarot cards, or any really other kinds of cards that you might want. But you can load in custom stuff, so you could adjust that fairly quickly. Spinners are noticeably missing too. You would, unless spinners were under dice. It looks like you can just make custom models of objects to put textures on 3D objects. Miscellaneous random dominoes, random mahjong, reversey chips, backgammon. Mancala is noticeably missing here, even though you could make marble games pretty easily under this classic thing here as far as game setups. There is no Mancala board. There is no checkers board. Weirdly. Yeah, some very basic things missing. And for a game that's been updated so much, I would expect a lot more. It definitely feels like what happened here is this game got overhyped, probably by a lot of mainstream video game journalists in particular, pre-COVID and post and during COVID. But there just was not enough critical consideration as far as what this really should be. Yeah. I don't think there's really anything else to look at here. This errata probably is backstory text you could write if you were playing a Dungeons and Dragons style tabletop game and you were gonna write backstory. You can color code it. Servers and lightings and physics and all of that seems moddable. It is internet connected, and any game that's internet connected does take a decent amount of extra work. But yeah, I really can't give this game a pass. Even on this first impression, it is just too simplistic of a experience. Needs a lot more effort and love put into it. I have no idea how you really would integrate Discord into this. It says you can do that. Let's see, I guess we could click a join game here. We could see how many people are playing at the moment. Seems like there's 489 games playing right now. If we hide the locked ones, that drops it down to 41 games. somebody could actually play. So wouldn't say that is a dead community. At some point here, they figured out a way to do Magic the Gathering Commander with microphone only, or at least that's what that's labeled. Here's another Magic the Gathering, here's another Magic the Gathering. That means there must be some kind of community mod that is just scanning in all of the Magic the Gathering cards. And inherently, I imagine this is the kind of game that is targeting that older generation of tabletop gamers, the ones that would go and play games on game night at a comic book store, or have a game night in a personal house. The ones that would be playing a lot of Magic the Gathering and had been playing Magic the Gathering for decades, or play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and have been playing Dungeons and Dragons for decades. Noticeably, you're not seeing lesser known card games, not even seeing second tier card games like Pokemon on that list, Pokemon the trading card game, or Yu-Gi-Oh, which would be number 2 and number 3 in my mind as far as all of that goes. And yeah, Hearthstone. There's no reason why you would try to recreate Hearthstone in Tabletop Simulator. But yeah, I guess I don't want to drone on any further. This is going to be my quote quick look of Tabletop Simulator. So I now know what it is. I am fairly unimpressed. Your mileage will expand quite a bit if you have friends, particularly friends who are willing to create the setups and do everything for you as far as just having music playlists and all of that. Still, it's not going to get you anywhere close to actually being able to go over to somebody's house and just share snacks and see each other face to face. This is definitely going to be a pale comparison to that, but it may be the only thing you can actually do depending on your situation. As far as a single player goes, like me, there is no single player option here at all. There's no reason why you'd want to play any of the games here when there are better options. Now, inherently it might be there are more expensive options on Steam. Buying a chess game alone might be more expensive than buying Tabletop Simulator on sale, but with that you're getting a bespoke game that has been custom programmed to follow the rules of chess, and if you do get a good chess game, it's likely going to have a little bit of a tutorial at least, and probably some music and sound effects and things like that, animations potentially, arguably too. Even if you're going to go with one fairly dry and boring looking tabletop simulator game like this and compare that to, say, chess.com, which has a mobile app. Chess.com, focusing exclusively on chess, also has puzzles, and just everything is way more focused around chess and only chess, and it just works a lot better that way. So yeah, even for a basic game like chess, which I'm using basic as in something that's been established for a long time, there is better options than Tabletop Simulator. The only argument, I guess, is if you have a Steam Deck, if you're in the middle of nowhere and you want to play specific tabletop games, if that's your focus. I imagine though Tabletop Simulator is for people who want to only buy a few games on Steam and not really the kind of people who would have dozens of games on their Steam account, or like your average Steam account owner, hundreds of games potentially. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. Thanks.